Testing 1, 2, 3. Hi everyone, and welcome to another Woke Wednesday. This podcast was created to shed light on the different societal issues which have been at the forefront of public discourse through one of the most divisive times in American history. More so, it was created with the intent of allowing those that have often been neglected, shunned, or misunderstood to have a chance to share their experiences and thoughts. I hope this dialogue encourages critical conversation and activism amongst all listeners. And I hope you'll tell all your friends about it and share on your social platforms.
Give us what justice requires, and that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you for your time.
Two days ago, CNN fired Marc Lamont Hill after his comments on Palestine during a meeting at the UN for the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Hill's speech called for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. For those of you who don't know, Palestinians chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, as a call and response because of the conflict over land claims that date back a couple thousands of years. People responded to Hill's speech by calling him and his comments anti-Semitic and asserting that he called for the violent genocide of Jewish people, although nothing he said in his speech reflected anti-Semitism. His comments from the river to the sea persuaded his critics to portray it as a dog whistle to dangerous factions that want to destroy Israel. However, by Hill calling for a free Palestine, he was advocating for the liberation of a Palestinian state that has been at war and in turmoil against the state of Israel. After CNN fired Hill, people also called for his firing of his professor position at Temple University in Philadelphia. Temple's board responded by saying his speech blackens the university's name unnecessarily and that they are searching for remedies. But it'll be interesting as to what those remedies consist of, because Hill does have tenure with the school, making it very difficult for an actual firing to occur. Hill also responded to CNN's firing and the anti-Semitism comments with several tweets that detail his personal opinion on the matter. He responded with, "I support Palestinian freedom. I support Palestinian self-determination. However, I am deeply critical of Israeli policy and practice. I do not support anti-Semitism, killing Jewish people, or any of the other things attributed to my speech. I spent my life fighting these things." Moreover, Hill's gained support from different social groups and social justice advocates that all reaffirm the idea that by CNN firing Hill, any speech that's critical of Israel's brutality reflects anti-Semitism. Moving forward, it will be interesting to watch the outcome of whether or not he will be fired, being that he is tenured and his comments have evoked a wide array of emotions. I also believe that it's important to acknowledge that advocating for Palestinians to be respected and for Israelis and Palestinians alike to have peace and freedom is not anti-Semitic. It's simply the right thing to do. Not to mention, supporting Israel has deliberately benefited the U.S. economic interests, which has also led us to largely overlook the human rights abuses which have taken place for thousands of years in the region. Not to mention, the root cause of this fighting stems from contention over border issues and religious holy lands. Please know that this will not be the last time I address the Israel-Palestine conflict, because I do believe it's an important issue to focus on that often gets misconstrued and highlighted from one specific point of view, and it'll be addressed in a later episode. However, this episode, I'm going to focus on a crucial issue that should be at the forefront of not just mine, but every American's mind and the global community, and that's climate change.
It's been 50 years since scientists felt confident enough that we know it's real and it's serious and we have to act now, and warned a U.S. president of the dangers of climate change. Over 50 years ago, that was Lyndon B. Johnson. So how did we come to be in a state where the number that a thermometer gives us is somehow different if we vote liberal or conservative?
The majority of Americans actually do believe that climate change is real and that it's human caused, but there's this knee-jerk reaction because Republicans believe that, well, climate change policies, that's a Democrat thing, so therefore I can't support it.
It wasn't always the case, and that's a really important thing to recognize. Republicans and Democrats had similar perceptions of climate change. Approximately 2 out of 3 of both groups saw climate change as real and problematic. But over the past 2 decades, Democrats have moved in one direction, becoming increasingly more convinced that this problem is real, it's human-caused, it's serious, and Republicans, unfortunately, have moved in exactly the opposite direction. Many people are hearing from their elected officials that the kinds of solutions would be worse than the nature of the problem.
When you have Democrats and Republicans agreeing on these foundational truths that climate change is real and it's human-caused, the disagreement comes around the solutions.
It does. And I found this because often when you start conversations, people will throw up sciencey sounding objections like it's just a natural cycle or climate has always changed. Or they'll throw up religiously sounding objections like God said there will always be seasons or the world's going to end anyways. But if you let them keep on talking, within less than a minute, just about every single person will naturally transition from those sciencey or religiously sounding arguments to, I don't want the government setting my thermostat, telling me what type of car I can or can't drive.
I don't want paper straws, right? That's the latest one that we've been hearing. So, Catherine, you go around the country and you speak to a lot of different kinds of people, but you speak to a lot of faith-based groups. Is your mission to target those who are really staunchly, believing that climate change isn't real?
No, it absolutely isn't. Because for those people, rejecting the science of climate change is such an integral part of their identity that unless they want to change, they will not. My personal definition for dismissive is somebody who, an angel of God with brand new tablets of stone could appear before them saying global warming is real, and they still wouldn't change their mind. So rather than talk to the 9 or 10% of the population that is truly dismissive, I talk to the rest of us, the 70% who feel like it's a distant issue in space or time. It only matters to people who live far away or future generations or polar bears up in the Arctic. I talk to those people because for those people, it isn't a case of instilling new values. I truly believe that we already have all the values we need to care. Nobody has taken the time, though, to connect the values we have to a changing climate.
If the biggest challenge for people like yourselves is getting people on both sides to be on board with solutions, how do you go about doing that?
I try not to be policy prescriptive, but I try to lay out all the solutions for people to show them that, you know what, there's actually libertarian solutions to climate change. There's free market solutions, there's bipartisan solutions, there's technological solutions, and even just giving some examples of things that are already happening today can often surprise people and inspire them.
What's so interesting to me is how a lot of people in this country seem to selectively reject science. You're not going to reject science when it's a cure that's going to save your life, but when it's climate science, that's a lot more convenient for a lot of people. Why is that?
3/4 of Americans will not even try to name a single living scientist. The point being, we don't know scientists by and large. And how can you trust people that you don't personally know? We trust our friends and family members most. Our friends and family members don't know a whole lot about global warming. We trust the politicians who we entrusted by voting for them. We trust them a lot.
Just about every single person I have ever met does not truly believe that basic science is incorrect, but they believe that the proposed solutions to climate change are fundamentally opposed to their ideology, their values, and their welfare.
Now, While it might seem mundane to define this word, it's important to highlight what it actually means, especially because not all are familiar with it, and there are some, myself included, that have misinterpreted it. Moreover, it's important to differentiate climate change and global warming because the two are often talked about synonymously, yet they aren't necessarily the same. Global warming refers only to the Earth's rising surface temperature, whereas climate change encompasses the long-term warming of the planet and the side effects from that warming. In a nutshell, global warming is a symptom of the larger human-induced problem, climate change. These human-induced problems occur because of our increase in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from humans burning coal, oil, and gas. These increases in greenhouse gases reduce vital O3 in the atmosphere, which helps block radiation from the sun. This causes the crucial layer of ozone to deplete, allowing warmer radiation from the sun to infiltrate the atmosphere. This warms oceans as well as the Earth itself. There's also a reverse effect, with increased radiation levels remaining trapped in the atmosphere by pieces of the ozone layer still existing in our atmosphere. So, essentially, greenhouse gases deplete the ozone layer, which allows more solar radiation to affect our atmosphere, and radiation remains trapped in our atmosphere by remnants of the ozone layer still protecting the Earth. Moreover, being that this concept is the long-term alteration in climate and weather patterns, we must recognize that this is not something that has occurred to our planet overnight. However, it is something that with continual disregard will be life-altering not just for our future generations, but is already life-altering for those living now. Moreover, it's crucial to point out that climate change encompasses the global impact humans are having on our planet and not something that's respective to the U.S. alone. Ecosystems and different human communities are encountering the impact of climate change currently in regards to water, energy, transportation, wildlife, agriculture, and health. The change in water resources, for example, already adversely affect communities. In the western part of the U.S., droughts have increased, leading to less snow accumulating on the mountains, which then lead to a decrease in stores packing water for later use. Not only that, at least 10% of the U.S.'s watersheds are being used well beyond their means for agriculture, municipal use, which means water processed for human consumption, and the cooling of power plants. In places like Southern California and Las Vegas, the biggest demand for water is for municipal use. Alongside the topic of human consumption, our food supply is extremely dependent on the changing climate as well. Changes like an increase in temperature, water stress, diseases create significant challenges for farmers and ranchers that supply our food. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN estimates that by 2050, crop yields will decline by a widespread of 10 to 25% because of climate change. The world food production must increase by 60% to keep up with the demographic changing, which means the human population increasing. However, if practices and policies are not implemented that will coincide with the human population shifting, then literally, how are people going to get the food they need to eat? That's not being overdramatic, that's just factual. Not only that, catching 40% of the world's main fishes is a factor if temperatures continue to rise, which they will, if something effective is not done. Not to mention the economic costs of climate change. This phenomenon is extremely expensive. Currently, the global community wastes or loses about 1/3 of our food, which equals $2.6 trillion a year, which then equates to $700 billion in environmental costs and $900 billion in social costs. Y'all, there's literally billions and billions of dollars being wasted because as the shift in our climate continues to happen, and our ability to feed ourselves is at a significant risk. Not only that, wildlife extinction and our forests are also at a huge disadvantage with the rising temperatures and the weather extremes occurring. Forests are of huge significance to us because they soak up the main greenhouse gas responsible for global warming, carbon dioxide. Not only that, they're home to an abundance of different animals that represent our biodiversity. The Amazon rainforest is one of the biggest examples of this. However, even the slightest level of climate change have the potential to cause high numbers of animal extinction if humans are not actively working to not only maintain our forests, which means we need to stop the widespread use of deforestation. Then, how will our food chains and ecosystems continue to maintain their functionality if there are no homes for wildlife or no wildlife altogether? How will the circle of life continue if wildlife have nowhere to live and maintain their lives if there are none to begin with? Now, we've covered a lot of crucial statistics that are currently happening to our planet right now. But I don't want to forget that there are specific communities that would be adversely affected if we chose to decrease specifically the amount of coal we're using. On a global scale, coal mining has created 78,800 jobs and contributed to the GDP of Canada specifically by $12 billion. In the U.S., in 2015, coal miners encompassed over 1 million of our jobs, and they added $990 billion to the U.S. economy. Completely ignoring the fact that this business does contribute to our country with jobs and our overall economy would be ignorant, because looking at these numbers, we can obviously tell that this business secures people's income. Yet, there are alternatives to our extreme use of coal that would be beneficial to the security of our planet. Renewable energy sources such as solar energy, geothermal, wind, hydropower are all alternatives to using coal and conserving our planet's energy. Not only that, creating crop varieties that are resistant to extreme weather changes, closing the socioeconomic gap so that people can afford food altogether, and literally listening to scientists and researchers that have done years and years of work on this problem are some of the first steps in combating climate change. And yes, later on in this episode, I am going to address the fact that our actual president does not believe that climate change exists, despite actual evidence that it is a real thing. But we're not there yet. As reported by the New York Times, global warming could reduce the U.S. economy by more than 10% by the end of the century. With new reports released by the United States Congress, as well as global climate reports issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. There is a bizarre contrast between this report, which is being released by this administration, Donald Trump, and this administration's own policy, said Philip B. Duffy, who's president of the Woods Hole Research Center. The report puts the most precise price tags to date on the costs to the U.S. economy of projected climate impacts. $141 billion from heat-related deaths, $118 billion from sea level rise, and $32 billion from infrastructure damage by the end of the century, among others. Extreme weather events driven by global warming are virtually certain to increasingly affect U.S. trade and economy, including import and export prices, and businesses with overseas operations and supply chains. Such disasters will temporarily shutter factories both in the U.S. and abroad, causing price spikes for products from apples to automotive parts, scientists have predicted. So much of the supply chain for American companies is overseas that almost no industry will be immune from the effects of climate change at home or abroad. This is literally evidence from people who have studied this phenomenon for years. Not only that, specifically southern states will also suffer more than others if the trend increases because of the heightened agricultural risks that are extremely specific to our region because agriculture is such a huge entity in the South. Now, let's shift to a piece of legislation that could potentially be the saving point for climate change.
It was not perfect. Some critics at the time felt that it did not go far enough, but the key achievement was for the very first time getting virtually the entire world, including China and India, to commit to taking action. It was a historic moment, and it was celebrated like this.
The moment the world agreed to tackle climate change.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
And so the Paris Agreement was born, and emotions spilled over. So much so that Laurence Fabius banged the gavel again.
So, I have been asked to bang the gavel again. It's a little gavel, but I think it can do great things.
Okay. Listen, I'll say this. If you are trying to convince people of the gravity of a moment, maybe don't use such a humiliatingly shitty gavel, because it just undercuts what you're trying to say. It would not be appropriate for a judge to conclude a death penalty case by saying, I hereby sentence you to hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy upon your soul. Right? Solemn moment for everybody. So why did Trump announce that he would pull out this week? Well, one clue may have come during his speech on Thursday when he actually talked about that happy celebration that you just saw, but seemed to see something sinister in it.
The rest of the world applauded when we signed the Paris Agreement. They went wild. They were so happy. For the simple reason that it put our country, the United States of America, which we all love, at a very, very big economic disadvantage.
What are you talking about? They were happy because they secured a landmark victory for the future of the planet, you fucking egomaniac. The whole world is not secretly conspiring against the United States. The only thing the whole world is secretly conspiring to do is convince everyone that there are two Olsen twins. There is no way it is just one girl moving very quickly backwards and forwards. It's an optical illusion. The Olsen twins thing is a massive scam, and the whole world is in on it, and the only thing that I don't quite know yet is why. But we don't have time to get into it. The point is, if the agreement was a scheme to hurt American businesses, you know who that might be news to? Many American businesses, because they were not just in favour of this agreement, they even made a last-ditch attempt to change Trump's mind.
25 companies, including Microsoft and Intel, have purchased a full-page ad in today's New York Times arguing the agreement generates jobs and economic growth.
The Paris Agreement, which was a landmark piece of global climate legislation, built upon the G20 Convention and for the first time brings all nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt to its effects, with enhanced support to assist developing countries to do so. As such, it charts a new course in the global climate effort. The Paris Agreement's central aim is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change by keeping a global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Additionally, the agreement aims to strengthen the ability of countries to deal with the impacts of climate change. However, to reach these ambitious goals, appropriate financial flows, a new technology framework, and an enhanced capacity building framework will be put in place, thus supporting action by developing countries and the most vulnerable countries in line with their own national objectives. The agreement also provides enhanced transparency of action and support through a more robust transparency network, which Donald Trump backed out of to the dismay of the larger international community. Now, our literal president does not believe in this widely proven fact, but that doesn't mean that you have to not believe as well. And let's not forget, at the recent G20 meeting, he's the only world leader that didn't sign the national agreement in planning to combat change. Not only is this embarrassing, because it is embarrassing, it's completely ignorant that the leader of such an advanced nation would not only ignore the literal evidence provided from people that have been studying this for centuries, but also put the actual security and existence of our nation and its citizens in danger. Quite frankly, it's insane not to believe that this doesn't exist. And is it going to harmfully impact our future generations? I truly don't understand how this man, who is the president of our country, could not believe in this. And not only just him, but others as well. I hope this episode was informative and thought-provoking for all that listen, and for those that will listen in the future. I hope that all of the data, all of the facts, everything that I spoke about propels you all to contact your representative about this issue, as well as getting involved in volunteer groups that are local to your state or region. There should literally be headlines about this everywhere reading, "Yes, you and your family will die if climate change persists." I don't know how else to say it. Y'all, this is something that is currently happening to our planet right now, and that if we do not take seriously and actually make meaningful steps and changes to combat this problem, people will die. Dead. People will die. And I truly don't know what it will take for our president to understand that. But I hope that he does someday, preferably sooner rather than later, come to the realization that this does exist, and that people, not just here, not just right now, but our future generations will be severely impacted by this. Remember, all of these opinions are my own. However, this one especially should be everyone else's. Have a woke Wednesday. Thank you for another Woke Wednesday. Transcripts of entire episodes will be available on the Woke Wednesday website. Episodes are written and produced by Hannah Mason and Trey Leonard of Linico Entertainment. Episodes are hosted by Hannah Mason and edited by Trey Leonard. All graphics are designed by Anna French,